welcome to Alley Chats. I am Rob Southgate. We're going to cut right to it today. I've got a special guest, somebody I'm super excited to talk to. I've got Mike Barron with me. If you don't know who he is yet, you are going to know very shortly once he starts talking about some of the things he's worked on, which is, Mike, what? Is it just about everything?
Oh, no.
No?
I wrote The Punisher and Flash and worked on Star Wars, Bruce Lee comics, but I'm probably best known for my own creations, Nexus and Badger.
Yeah, which are both exceptional books. So those are great. And then you also have a new one. You're doing Florida Man, right?
Well, I'm working on a fourth Florida Man novel. There are already 3 Florida Man novels. And if you want to, they're all on Amazon. If you go to Amazon and type my name in, Mike Barron, Baron, just like the Bloody Red Baron, not Barren, not Barron, but Baron. Most of my stuff will pop up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you've got quite a legacy of things that you've put out there. You looking at your background right now, I can see you actually worked on one of my favorites. You worked on Dead Man as well.
That's true. I'm very proud of that work with Kelly Jones. That was the book when Kelly exploded.
That was a hell of a book.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's awesome. So, Mike, why don't you give a little history? I mean, we were just kind of talking about some of the books, but how did you get into comics? How did this all come about?
Well, I wanted to be a writer ever since I was 12 years old. I went into a cigar store in Mitchell, South Dakota, and purchased a John D. MacDonald novel for 35 cents. It was called The Deep Blue Goodbye. And as I stood on the sidewalk looking at the lurid cover, I had an epiphany, which was that MacDonald wasn't writing these for his health. He did this for a living. So I decided that's what I wanted to do. It just took me a long, long way to get there. I was also fascinated with the work of Carl Barks, who created Uncle Scrooge for Disney and wrote and illustrated his own Duck comics for many years. And anybody who is interested in how to do a comic that clicks, that fires on every cylinder, just look at the work of Carl Barks. He was a master creator. There are no wasted panels. There are no wasted pictures. Everything works in concert. When I was in college, I thought I'd write a quick paperback novel and make a few $100.
Sure.
So I sat down, I started to write. I had no plan. I just started to write. And after a couple of pages, I realized that I didn't know what I was doing, and I gave up. And I didn't return to novels for, 40 years after that. But
wow.
But how I got into comics, I was in the right place at the right time. I was working at an insurance company in Madison, Wisconsin, when I got a phone call from an editor who said, "Hey, there's a guy down here. He's trying to sell us his art, and I think you ought to take a look at it." So I met Steve Rude on the pages of the Student Union, and he wanted to do comics, but he couldn't write, and I wanted to do comics, but I couldn't draw. So I said, well, let's do comics. And we were in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, no kidding.
Capital City Distribution wanted to start their own comic book line. So I went home and I brainstormed Nexus, and I drew the first 12 pages out by hand, which is how I wrote comics for 25 years. I would draw each page out by hand. And although I'm not a great artist, I'm good enough to get my ideas across. Editors and writers loved it because you could tell at a glance what I wanted on the page. And it also taught me very many valuable lessons. How much weight a page could bear, the importance of an establishing shot, which must appear on every page, and most importantly, what happens next, because I was writing by the seat of my pants. And I draw a panel that I was happy with. They said, this represents the story. This is part of the story. And then I would look at the blank space next to it, and it forced me to think about what happens next. And that's the most important question in fiction, because if the reader doesn't care, he's not going to turn the page.
Right.
So I think in that way, because I was writing that way and thinking that way, there was very little filler in my comics, that everything was part of the story, be it visual or be it words. I also learned to be parsimonious with my words because comics are a visual medium. And one of the most important lessons in any kind of fiction, and this includes novels as well, is to show, don't tell, which means that any information you can impart to the reader or viewer visually without having to explain it, you should. And if anybody wants to see a superb example of this, just watch the opening of any Better Call Saul episode, which usually begins with a silent 5-minute panning shot. You don't know what's going on, but it's intriguing. And when you get to the end of that panning shot, you're ready to go into the story because you know what's happening.
You are propelled. I agree. Those opening shots on Better Call Saul are amazing. And even if they don't flip the cards and tell you what's happening, you can't stop thinking about it. So that is a masterwork right there.
I agree.
Are you by chance friends with Art Baltazar? Do you know him?
It doesn't ring a bell.
Oh yeah, comics. He did like Itty Bitty Hellboy, Tiny Titans, all that. At some point, Mike, when you're at a Comic-Con and you see an Oh Yeah Comics banner, go up and talk to Art Baltazar. You will not find a guy in comics who's a bigger fan of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. I think you guys would get along.
All right.
We actually were going to put a podcast on called Breaking Baltazar just so that he could sit and talk about it.
It's shorten that to Breaking Balls.
Yes. Although I'm trying to have it distributed across the world, and that might, India might not go with that one. So wow, really fascinating. So you said you didn't go back to novel writing for 40 years. But you were writing comics throughout, or did you just kind of put it aside?
I was writing comics until about 1996, when for a variety of reasons I fell out of the ass end of the industry. I didn't really understand what it was to maintain a career. I don't blame anyone but myself, but there were 10 years there when I couldn't get any work writing whatsoever, and I had commitments. I had a wife who was ill. I took every job I could get, including janitor and unloading automobile bumpers and things like that.
Sure.
And during the course of that time, we moved from Wisconsin to Colorado. And then she died from an overdose of OxyContin and vodka. I was very naive. I should have realized she was a lifelong alcoholic, but I did, but there was nothing I could do about it.
Sure.
And after that happened, a couple months passed, and I decided to try my hand again. And this time, while I was writing, I realized I understood story, not just in comics, which is a completely different art form. I mean, there are a lot of crossovers, but a novel is very different. I understood prose writing, and I understood what constituted story. And since then, I have not made a misstep, because once you understand what constitutes story, you stick to the story. I mean, that doesn't mean you can't go off on tangents if they relate to the story, but they must relate to the story. And then when you understand what story is, you don't make any missteps. And since then, I've been trying to write 3 novels a year.
Wow.
Which is what any professional novelist will do. I have a friend who writes 6 novels a year, and he does an outline. He does an outline. I am now a firm believer in the outline.
Okay. So that is, you do like to work with the outline. It's funny because I do talk to writers, various genres, that some are all about the outline, and some of them, like you said, they can't work within an outline. I know when I was trying to do some writing, for me, it had to be very, very loose sketches because I was going to break it every time.
Right. Well, no matter how detailed your outline, at some point, you're going to veer away from it. That's just the way it is. That's always happened to me. I write the outline, it fills my head with thoughts, but when you get into the bulk, the meat of the story, and if you have a compelling character that you believe in, and he's fully fleshed out, at some point, the character turns around and tells you what he's going to do next. And I always thought that a writer has to surprise himself before he can surprise his readers. I believe in that firmly. And if you have a good sense of story, you will plant seeds early in the story. You don't know why. Why did I introduce this character? But as you near the end of the story, it becomes clear. And that character or that development becomes very important. And for me, the ultimate ending should come as both a complete surprise and, in retrospect, inevitable.
Fascinating. I do have a question looking at your body of work, like taking Badger into consideration and Florida Man and some of the other works, the Nexus, obviously. But then you've also done a lot of work as a gun for hire, working on, What If and Batman and what have you. You've worked on everything, it feels like. Do you find it easy to jump into another character's universe and write, or do you kind of prefer to do your own thing and kind of craft around that? What is your thought there between original versus hired gun?
I would prefer to work on my own creations as long as they're doing well. But I'm always happy to write for others. If they ask me to do something, I do my research, think about it. I work up an outline. I proceed from there. I just finished I think it's a 62-page cobalt blue graphic novel.
Okay.
And I wrote a tiger blue issue that's being crowdfunded right now. And I'm adapting a screenplay for a producer. This is a science fiction story, and of course I have the screenplay, so that's very easy for me to adapt because the language of movies is already visual, but you still have to specify what you're going to include in that panel.
Sure.
You have to choose what words you use, and always keep in mind that there has to be an establishing shot on every page. Well, what is an establishing shot? It's an image that shows everybody involved in that scene and their physical relationship to one another. And it's very important. The only time you don't use an establishing shot is when you start with a mob in a bar or something, or a clubhouse, and then you go from talking head to talking head as they converse. And that's very hard to pull off, because when I read the language in a lot of those comics, and we've all seen them, we've all seen a page that's divided up into 6, 9, or 10 panels, and each one has a different talking head, and they're all conversing. Well, that conversation has to be interesting in and of itself. It has to use fresh language, or else the reader's eyes glaze over and they ask, why am I being subjected to this? It's not entertaining.
Right. It's almost like a chore getting through it at times. I mean, I can think of,
especially if the writing is bad.
I can think of a couple of times that it's been effective, where it's compelled me to keep going. Specifically, the one that's popping into my mind is a page from The Dark Knight Returns, where it had the talking heads. It didn't really have anything other than like shots of news anchors talking about what was going on. And it was compelling. It drew you to the next thing. But I'm sure the next thing was a big splash page of, Batman flying through the night with lightning and whatever it was. But you're right. You do need that establishing shot. It's interesting. You think very much like a filmmaker. I talk to a lot of filmmakers, and I've dabbled. You are so right. And I wish that a lot of writers, young writers, actually studied what you're talking about so that they understood, number one, the importance of that establishing shot, of keeping the reader's interest even at the end of a page. And I'm sure you've seen McLeod, his book, Understanding Comics, where he talks all about the importance of the white part of the page. And you said it, that divide between this panel into this panel and that white space in between tells you everything. It's so interesting.
You mentioned newscasters.
Yeah.
And that's a very good device to use, especially when something big is happening and it becomes news. It's fine to show a talking head. This is Rebecca Turmoil for WKOW News reporting that a meteor has landed on City Hall. I mean, that's a very effective way to transmit information to the reader. I don't use it all the time, but I use it a lot, especially when you're painting a broad canvas, when there are things that demand public reporting. But I also take pains to make it interesting, to put something in there in the language itself, so it doesn't sound like every other newscast.
Yeah. Yeah. Going back to something you talked about adapting. Somebody gives you a screenplay and you adapt it into a comic. First of all, you've done this with novels as well, like Heir to the Empire.
Yeah.
Your work on that was exceptional. I mean, those books are great. Timothy Zahn's work is great. I thought the comics stood on their own as great pieces of work. So, that's a great example of adapting. Do you find that like adapting a novel is, because it's not as a script, you've got the visual cues and the stage direction and everything. With a novel, you've got to read through and pick through what to put on the page.
Well, Timothy Zahn is a very visual writer, and it was very easy to adapt his work.
Well, you did an exceptional job. I'm thinking of when an adaptation is done right of a film or a novel, it like I said, it can stand on its own. I remember reading the intro to Game of Thrones, the comic series, and George R. R. Martin said that he felt that the comic stood on its own. Like, if you like the show, if you like the books, you should read the comics, because they are three different things, different ways for your brain to take in the information. And I go back to when I was in high school and the adaptation of Blade Runner came out. I was obsessed with that adaptation. I mean, and it tied into the book even more so than the movie at that. Like, there were things, because I had read the book and I had seen the movie, and it's so great. And I know that you do the same thing. And I think that might be like somebody who's a novelist first might be able to pull that out. Does that make sense?
Well, it does. And now I'm adapting my own novels, such as the Florida Man graphic novel. And we're about to start work on the second one. But the second one, it's a lot. I was very happy with the first, and so were all my readers. But the second one is going to be a lot better because for a number of reasons, but it snaps, crackles, and pops on every panel. And that's what I try to do with a comic book story. I want you to go from panel to panel with excitement, because you can't wait to see what happens next, because what you're looking at is so damn interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when I think about Badger and I think about Nexus, that is absolutely how I would start describing that. If somebody were to ask me about those, they crackle, and you're driven by them. They're just great books. Now, okay, the world is full of everybody turning these things into, the IPs into TV shows and movies. Where's the Nexus movie? Oh, okay. I didn't ask that question. Where's the Badger movie? I didn't ask that question. Yeah.
Keep your fingers crossed.
They are crossed, because I think that your work would be exceptional. And it reminds me of like some of the pieces like Invincible or The Boys, where when they finally get adapted, you go, okay, I'm not just seeing the same thing. This is something new. This is fun. The Preacher series, same thing for me. So I think you fall into an elite class of those types of comics.
Well, thank you.
Really look forward to something like that. So, okay, we're going to reel it back. I got a question that I ask everybody that comes on this show. Since Comic-Cons, now they're back, so my normal question doesn't have quite the same impact. We're going to reframe it a little bit. You're going to Comic-Cons now. You're back kind of in the fold. If this is your dream con means we're out of time and out of space and out of who's alive and who's dead. Who would you love to meet at a Comic-Con?
Geraldo Borges.
Wow. Of all the people, that's who you pick. And why?
Great artist. We've been corresponding for years. I hope to get him to draw the next Badger comic. In fact, I should get on that this week and finish the first script. We are talking to a publisher about it. But if necessary, I believe I could crowdfund that very successfully.
And you want to meet Hernando. That would be your one. That's fantastic. I love that, man. I love that. When you do your crowdfunding, I'm going to invite you, reach out to me, because I have another show called Go Fund This, where people come on and they talk about the tiers and they talk about their stretch goals, and it makes people aware of their projects. And I get a lot of comic book people on there, and I absolutely would love to have you on that. You'll especially love it because it's a 15-minute show.
Well, Rob, we're about to launch a new campaign for Private American. I sent you the cover on Facebook in your PM if you want to take a look at it. And we're going to launch that later this month. And we're very excited about that. What is Private American? It's everything Captain America should be, but isn't, with a little Punisher thrown in.
Fantastic. Now, of the characters like the Punisher, you mentioned the Punisher. Of these characters you've worked on, this is such a crappy question, and I'm asking it. Who do you love? Who's your favorite that you've worked on outside of your catalog?
Oh, the Punisher would be right up there.
Punisher is the one, huh? You know, I kind of baited you with that because I had a feeling, but it could have gone Deadman. It could have gone Deadman.
I love Deadman too, and I'd be happy to do one of those. But I'm at a point in my life where I enjoy stories that stink of reality, that I believe could actually happen. And for a variety of reasons, most of the superhero fare that comes out today begs credulity. I'm not buying it. Some stuff I do, but most I don't. And my taste in creation runs towards stuff that you think, yeah, this is real. And that doesn't mean it lets out the fantastic, because I would include Alien and Aliens in that. Those are two movies, you watch them and you say, yeah, I believe this has actually happened, because they've been thought through. They're consistent. All the details are right. It could happen.
Yeah, it's got that air of reality to it. I completely agree. Once again, I mentioned Blade Runner. I actually feel the same way about Blade Runner, where it's like, this could be a future that could absolutely be real. You know, I know that people go, come on. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Come on. Okay. 2 years ago, we might have said, come on. Today we're saying, ooh, we're much closer than we thought to that reality. So, okay, I see Private American. So I'm going to invite you back on, and we're going to do a Go Fund This about that. When does that one launch?
It might be later this month. We already have a sign-up page. I believe it's the privateamericancomic.com. Let me check that out. See here.
So while you're looking, I'm going to tell the audience, number one, check out Mike Barron on Amazon. And Mike, you're going to give them other places they can check you out. And check out Go Fund This, because later this month, we will have an episode where he gives the details on Private American. And that way you can support him directly and you can make this book happen, which is always excellent. If one of the stretch goals is going to be that he's going to meet his artist in person at a Comic-Con, we're going to make his wildest dreams come true. So what'd you find, Mike?
It's theprivateamerican.com.
theprivateamerican.com. Excellent. All right. Mike, where can people find you? I know we mentioned Amazon, but where can people buy your work? Where can people find you? Where do you want to send them?
Well, first of all, Amazon. If you go to Amazon, type in Mike Barron. It's Baron, just like the Bloody Red Baron. I also am on Twitter at Bloody Red Baron. I'm on Facebook in the comics and novels of Mike Barron, and also Michael A. Barron. I have a website, bloodyredbaron.com. I'm on Substack as Mike Barron. I don't know where I'm going to be. those are some of the places. And, I have a newsletter too. And if you want to be included in the newsletter, just send me your email. You can send it to me via Twitter at Bloody Red Baron or on Facebook.
Great. Excellent. I'm going to encourage everybody to do that. And I'm going to put all of this in the show notes so people can just click on it and go right to your stuff. Substack, there's your newsletter right there. I'm sure you share newsletter information on there, and Substack's just great. It's a great place to connect with artists and writers, for sure.
Right. Mostly it's essays about popular culture, or else these crazy letters I get from scammers in Nigeria or Laos. If you go, you'll see what I mean. If you go to my Substack column, there's a couple of columns there. I just reprint these crazy letters I get. Dear sir, I am the widow of the late Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. I am trying to transfer $120 million to the United States. Your cut will be 30%. Just send me the following information.
Yeah, and of course you do that, right? Yeah. All right, Mike, thank you so much for coming on. And we'll put this in the show notes. People, follow Mike every place he's telling you. Get his Substack. It's a lot of fun. And listen up for Go Fund This, where you can support him directly on Private American. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Robert.
You can find Alley Chats on Facebook by searching for @AlleyChats. You can also visit us at our webpage, smgpods.com/alleychats, for links to all our episodes and other cool stuff. One easy way to support our show is to rate and review Alley Chats wherever you listen to your podcasts. Those ratings really help us out and help others find our show as well. Alley Chats is produced and edited by Rob Southgate for Southgate Media Group. Be sure to subscribe to Alley Chats because you definitely don't want to miss an episode. Thanks again to our affiliate sponsors, Hunt-A-Killer and Tweaked Audio. Links to them are on our webpage and in the show notes. This wouldn't be possible without them. Our theme song is by Benny and the No Goods. Check out their awesome music at bennyandthenogoods.bandcamp.com. If you're an artist or writer or creative type that would have a table at an artist alley and would like to be on Alley Chats, message us through the Facebook page or email us directly at southgatemediagroup@gmail.com and we'll set up an interview. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow with another fantastic show.